Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are taking a completely different look at one of the world's most feared diseases. What if we've been thinking about cancer all wrong? What if it's not just some genetic lottery, but actually a metabolic problem? We're going to dig into the work of Dr. David Harper and explore the idea that what we eat might just be our most powerful weapon in this fight.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the constant daily battle our bodies are fighting against cancer. Then we're going to expose something called the axis of illness. We'll see how our diet can actually fuel the enemy, and then explore how we can, believe it or not, starve cancer with fat. And finally, we'll talk about why the science on this is, well, pretty darn sure.
So let's just jump right in with an idea that might completely change how you see things. You know, most of us think of getting cancer as this one-time, random, horrible event. But what if it's actually happening inside you all the time? I want you to seriously think about this for a second. Take a guess. How often does your body, an average person's body, create cells that could, if left unchecked, turn into a full-blown tumor? Once in your life? A dozen times? Maybe 100? The answer is absolutely staggering. It's 2 to 3 times per day. Now just let that sink in. The implication here is huge. It means our main line of defense isn't just good luck. It's our own immune system. It's on the job 24/7, hunting down and destroying these rogue cells before they ever get a foothold.
So our immune system is this incredible guardian, right? But the way we live in the modern world can really weaken its defenses. It can create this internal environment where disease just loves to grow. And this brings us to a really core idea in Dr. Harper's research. Dr. Harper calls these 3 things the axis of illness: inflammation, obesity, and insulin resistance. Think of them as the 3-headed monster behind something like 70% of all chronic diseases. We're talking heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and yep, cancer. They're the common denominator.
Okay, and here is the absolute key. These aren't 3 separate problems you can tackle one by one. No way. They are locked in a nasty, vicious cycle. Chronic inflammation makes you more insulin resistant. Insulin resistance tells your body to store more fat, which leads to obesity. And guess what? Obesity itself is an inflammatory state. So once you're on that merry-go-round, it just keeps spinning, creating the perfect soil for disease to take root.
So if this axis of illness is the soil, then what's the fertilizer? Well, according to Dr. Harper, the answer is sitting right on our plates. And his perspective, it pretty much flips the old low-fat, high-carb advice on its head. Dr. Harper uses this brilliant garden analogy, and it makes so much sense. Your body is the garden. Your healthy cells, those are the flowers. And those cancerous cells that pop up every day, they're the weeds. Your immune system is the gardener, constantly pulling those weeds. So the real question becomes, are you feeding your flowers, or are you dumping fertilizer on the weeds? And this right here shows you exactly how that works. Cancer cells are sugar fiends. They absolutely depend on glucose for energy. So a high-carb diet gives them a constant supply of their favorite food. That's the fuel. That same diet also spikes insulin, which is a growth hormone. So it's basically fertilizer telling those cancer cells to grow, grow, grow. A ketogenic diet, on the other hand, does the exact opposite. It cuts off the fuel supply and takes away the fertilizer. So how exactly does sugar fuel that inflammation piece of the puzzle? Well, it creates these nasty things called AGEs. When you have tons of sugar floating around in your blood all the time, that sugar literally starts sticking to things, to proteins in your body. It's almost like it's caramelizing you from the inside out. And this process creates these harmful compounds that just kick your body into a state of chronic, system-wide inflammation. This brings us, logically, to the ketogenic approach. I mean, if we know that high sugar and high insulin are pouring gasoline on the fire, then the solution is to just flip the entire equation. You switch your body's main fuel source from sugar over to fat. So, when you dramatically cut your carbs, your body starts burning fat for energy and produces these incredible molecules called ketones. The main one is called beta hydroxybutyrate, or BHB for short. But here's the really mind-blowing part. BHB isn't just a backup fuel. It's actually a powerful signal that tells your body to get healthier. I mean, just look at this. It turns out BHB is actually the brain's preferred fuel, even over glucose. It makes our mitochondria, the little power plants in our cells, work better. It helps dial down all that systemic inflammation we were just talking about. And this is a big one. It helps moderate something called the mTOR pathway.
So what the heck is mTOR? The simplest way to think about it is as your body's main growth switch. We absolutely need it to build muscle and repair tissues, but if that switch gets stuck in the on position all the time, it can accelerate the growth of things we really don't want to grow, like cancer cells. What BHB does is help gently turn that switch down, not off, but just down to a healthier level.
Okay, at this point, you're probably thinking, wow, this sounds amazing. So why isn't this front page news? Why can't we just prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that it works? And that brings us to a really important point about scientific honesty. This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? If a keto diet can starve cancer cells of their fuel and fertilizer, why isn't there a giant study that proves it prevents cancer in humans? Well, the answer comes down to the almost impossible challenge of studying nutrition. To prove this with what's called a randomized controlled trial, the absolute gold standard of science, you'd have to run an experiment like this. You'd need, say, 30,000 people. You'd have to lock them in a lab and control every single bite of food they ate for, 30 years. And you'd have to somehow control for everything else in their lives. Exercise, stress, smoking. You get the picture. It's impossible. It would cost billions and billions of dollars. So, since we can't get that perfect gold standard proof, how confident can we really be? This is where Dr. Harper has this fantastic, really down-to-earth way of putting. He calls it PDS. Pretty darn sure. We can't say it's proven but the same certainty as a drug trial because that impossible experiment doesn't exist. But when you look at all the evidence we do have, the mechanics of how it cuts off fuel and fertilizer, the clinical results, the anecdotal reports, you can be pretty darn sure that this is an incredibly powerful strategy. And really, this is the takeaway that matters most. When you look at every lifestyle factor out there, smoking, exercise, stress, you name it, the big global studies all point to one thing: nutrition is number one. Its impact is bigger than all those other factors combined. So this isn't about finding some magical cure. It's about how you can consistently, day after day, tip that daily battle in your favor. And that leaves us with the ultimate question. If your diet is the single biggest lever you can pull for your health, what are you going to do to start changing the soil in your own garden?